The anniversary dinner the restaurant was called the Golden Lantern, and my mother had picked it because she said the chandeliers reminded her of the one in the ballroom where she and my father had their first dance. I thought it looked more like something from a hotel lobby, but I kept that to myself. Mark squeezed my hand under the table as we sat down, and I knew he could feel the tension in my shoulders. David and Lisa were already there when we arrived, seated at the round table near the window with the good light. Lisa had her phone out, showing my mother pictures of their new patio furniture, and my mother was nodding along with that patient smile she wore when she was trying to be polite but didn't quite care. My father sat beside her, staring at the menu like it was written in a foreign language. "You're late," David said, not looking up from his own phone. "We're 5 minutes early," I said. "Traffic was terrible," Mark added, pulling out a chair for me. "The construction on Main Street has everything backed up." David finally put his phone down and gave me that look, the one that said he had already categorized my excuse and found it lacking. "You should have taken the side streets. I told Mom we'd be here by 6:30. "It's 6:27, I said. My mother reached across the table and patted my hand. "You're here now, sweetheart. That's all that matters. You look tired. Are you eating enough?" "I'm fine, Mom." "Your color is off," she said, studying my face with the same clinical attention she gave to her garden tomatoes. "You need more iron. I'll make you some of that liver casserole this weekend." Lisa laughed, a bright, polished sound that filled the space between us. "Oh, Mom, nobody eats liver casserole anymore. You'll give her a heart attack." "It's not the liver that gives you a heart attack," my father muttered, finally looking up from his menu. "It's the butter she puts in it." My mother swatted his arm. "You like my casserole?" "I like it fine," he said. "I just don't want to eat it every week." A man has limits. The waiter came by with the wine list, and David took charge immediately, ordering a bottle of something expensive without consulting anyone. Lisa nodded approvingly. Mark caught my eye and gave a small shrug. "We'd learned years ago not to fight David on the wine. 40 years, my mother said, leaning back in her chair and looking at my father with something that might have been wonder. "Can you believe it, George? 40 years. That's a long time to put up with someone," my father said, but there was a twinkle in his eye that hadn't been there a moment ago. "I suppose you deserve a medal." "I deserve a vacation," she said. "Somewhere warm. With a beach." David jumped in immediately. "We were actually looking at some resorts in Florida for you. Lisa found a great place near Sarasota. They have activities and everything." "We're not going to a resort," my father said flatly. "We're staying home." "They have shuffleboard," David persisted. "And bingo." "You love bingo." "I hate bingo." "Mom loves bingo." "I love the idea of bingo," my mother corrected, her voice tightening slightly. "The reality is a bunch of old people yelling at each other over a free dinner. I'd rather stay home and watch my shows." David opened his mouth to argue, but the waiter arrived with the wine, and the interruption gave my mother a chance to escape the conversation. She reached for my hand under the table and squeezed it, the way she used to when I was a child, and she was trying to tell me something without words. I squeezed back. The appetizers came. David had ordered for the table, of course, an assortment of fried things that my father couldn't eat because of his blood pressure, and that my mother would pick at politely before pushing aside. I ate some of the calamari, mostly to have something to do with my hands. Mark was making conversation with Lisa about her latest case, something involving a zoning dispute that sounded mind-numbing, but that she described with the enthusiasm of a general planning a campaign. "Your father's been having trouble with his hearing aids," my mother said suddenly, cutting through Lisa's monologue. "George, tell them about the hearing aids." My father looked up from his soup, startled. "What about them? They keep making that noise." The whistling sound. "Oh, that," he said. "They're fine. I just need to adjust them." "You can't adjust them yourself," my mother said. "You need to take them to the audiologist." "I've been telling him for 3 weeks." "I'll take him," David said immediately. "I know a specialist near my office. Top rated. I'll make the call tomorrow." "I can do it," I said. "My schedule is flexible. I can take a long lunch and drive him over." David waved his hand dismissively. "You've got that big project at work, remember, the one you're always stressed about. Let me handle the family stuff. That's what I'm here for." The comment landed like a stone in still water. I felt my face heat up, but I kept my voice level. It's not a big project. It's just busy. I can manage a phone call. David's closer to the specialist anyway, Lisa said, her tone smooth and reasonable. It makes more sense for him to do it. He can pick your father up on his way home. I don't need to be picked up, my father said. I can drive myself. I'm not senile. Nobody said anything to that. The word hung in the air, uncomfortable and unwanted. My mother stared at her plate. David cleared his throat. Dad, nobody said you were senile. We're just trying to help. I don't need help, my father said. I need people to stop treating me like I'm broken. The waiter appeared with the main courses, and the tension diffused as we all turned our attention to our plates. I had ordered the salmon, but I wasn't hungry anymore. I pushed the vegetables around with my fork, trying to find my appetite. Mark placed a hand on my knee under the table, a small gesture of solidarity. David launched into a story about one of his deals, something about a commercial property that had sold for twice its asking price. He was a good storyteller, I'd give him that. He knew how to make even the driest subjects sound interesting. Lisa laughed at all the right moments. My mother smiled, but her eyes kept drifting to my father, who was struggling to cut his steak with the same dexterity he'd had 10 years ago. His hands shook slightly, just a tremor, but it was enough to make the knife wobble against the plate. George, let me cut that for you, my mother said. I can cut my own steak. Your hands are shaking. It's the coffee I had this afternoon. Nothing to do with anything. I watched him struggle for another minute before I couldn't take it anymore. Dad, why don't we switch plates? The salmon is easier to cut. He looked at me, and for a moment I saw the exhaustion behind his eyes. Then he nodded, just barely, and I traded my plate for his. It was a small thing, a simple thing, but I felt my mother's gratitude radiating across the table like heat from a stove. David didn't notice. He was still talking about the deal, about the buyer and the seller, and the ridiculously short closing timeline. His voice was a constant hum in the background, a reminder of everything he had that I didn't. The corner office. The 6-figure salary. The wife who looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine. The easy confidence that came from never having to prove yourself. After dinner, we lingered over coffee while the waiter cleared the plates. My mother was animated now, talking about the anniversary party she wanted to throw next month. She had a list of names, a caterer she'd already spoken to, a whole vision that she'd been planning in secret for weeks. It'll be at the church hall, she said. Nothing fancy. Just friends and family. A few speeches. Some dancing. Speeches, my father groaned. Who's going to give speeches? Your brother, probably, my mother said. He's got away with words. And David, of course. I felt the familiar sting of being overlooked. Of course, David. David was always the one they turned to for speeches and toasts and public declarations. I was the one who helped with the practical things, the unglamorous things. I was the one who drove my mother to her doctor's appointments and helped my father with his taxes and listened to my mother's worries about everything from the garden to the state of the world. But I wasn't the one they called when they wanted to make a show of things. Maybe I could say something, I heard myself say. My mother looked at me, surprised. Oh, sweetheart, you don't have to do that. David's so good at that sort of thing. Let him handle it. I think I'd like to, I said, and there was something in my voice that made David look up from his phone. Sure, he said, but his tone was dismissive. You can say something. It's not a competition. Just keep it short. It's not a competition, Mark said, putting his arm around me. But it's a big anniversary. Everyone should have a chance to speak. David shrugged and turned back to his phone. The moment passed. My mother launched back into her plans, and my father stared out the window at the darkening street. I finished my coffee and tried not to feel the weight of everyone's expectations pressing down on me. Later, as we were getting our coats, my mother pulled me aside near the restrooms. Her face was serious, her eyes shadowed. Your father has been forgetting things, she said quietly. More than usual. I've found notes he's written to himself all over the house. Sticky notes on the fridge, reminders on the nightstand. Sometimes he doesn't even remember what they mean. Mom, you should have told me sooner. I didn't want to worry you. You have so much on your plate already, with work and everything. And David would just take over. You know how he gets. He'd have your father in a home before we could blink. David wouldn't do that. He would, she said firmly. He loves us, but he loves being in charge more. I wanted to tell you first, because you listen. You actually listen to what we want. I felt a lump form in my throat. What do you want? I want to stay in my house, she said. I want to live my life the way I always have. I don't want someone else making decisions for me. I don't want to be managed. She looked at me with such intensity that I had to look away. I understood what she was asking, even if she didn't say it. She wanted me to be her champion, the one who would stand up to David and his plans and his belief that he always knew best. I'll talk to him, I said. Don't talk to him, she said. Not yet. Just be aware. Just keep your eyes open. And help me when I need it. That's all. I nodded, and she patted my cheek the way she used to when I was a girl. Then she walked back to the table to collect her purse, leaving me standing alone in the dim hallway with the weight of her secrets on my shoulders. Walking to the car, Mark put his hand on the small of my back. Everything okay? You were back there for a while. Mom's worried about Dad, I said. The forgetfulness. She thinks it's getting worse. Mark was quiet for a moment. What does David think? I don't think David notices. He's too busy being David. Mark laughed softly. It's not a competition. I know it's not, I said, and I was surprised at how tired I sounded. But that's not how it feels. He opened the car door for me, and I slid into the passenger seat. The engine started with a low hum, and we pulled out of the parking lot. The streets were quiet, the streetlights casting pools of orange light on the pavement. I leaned my head against the window and let my eyes drift closed. My phone buzzed in my purse. I pulled it out and saw an email from my boss, Carl, with a subject line that made my stomach drop. Mandatory meeting, 8 a.m. I didn't open it. I didn't want to know what it said. Tomorrow was another day, another set of problems, another round of fighting for things that should have been mine by right. Tonight, I just wanted to rest. Tonight, I just wanted to forget that my brother had won again, that my mother was scared, that my father was slipping away from us one memory at a time. But even as I closed my eyes, I knew the rest wouldn't last. Tomorrow would come, and with it, more battles. The only question was whether I had the strength to fight them. Mark reached over and squeezed my hand. We'll figure it out, he said. Whatever it is, we'll figure it out. I squeezed back, and I tried to believe him. The missing client file. The office was already humming when I walked through the glass doors at 7:45. The cleaning crew was finishing up, pushing their carts through the aisles with the quiet efficiency of people who knew their work was invisible. I nodded at the security guard, a heavy-set man named Frank who always called me ma'am, and asked about my weekend, and made my way to my desk. I had a cup of coffee from the break room and sat down to review my notes one more time. The meeting with Carl was in 15 minutes, and I wanted to be prepared. The client file was on my screen, all the research I'd done, the strategy I'd spent weeks refining. It was good work. I knew it was good work. The question was whether Carl would see it that way. His office was on the 4th floor, a corner suite with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the river. I took the stairs instead of the elevator, partly for the exercise and partly to avoid running into anyone in the executive elevator. The 4th floor was quiet, the kind of hushed that made you feel like you were walking into a library instead of an office. Carl was already at his desk when I knocked on the open door. He was a tall man with a salt and pepper beard and the kind of perpetual scowl that came from running a department for too long. He gestured for me to sit. Good morning, I said, taking the chair across from him. Morning. He barely looked up from his computer. Before we start, I want you to meet someone. He's been brought in to help with strategic growth. The door opened and a man walked in. He was about my age, well-dressed in a navy suit that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. His hair was carefully styled, his smile perfectly calibrated. He extended his hand. Ethan Hayes, he said. I've heard great things about your work. I shook his hand, feeling the firm, practiced grip of someone who had shaken 1,000 hands before mine. Nice to meet you. Ethan's joining us from the Chicago office, Carl said. He's got an MBA from Northwestern and a track record of turning around challenging accounts. I'm bringing him in to help on the Baker retail account. You're still lead, but I want him to get up to speed quickly. I felt a flicker of unease, but I pushed it down. That's fine. I can share the background materials with him. I'd appreciate that, Ethan said, settling into the chair beside me. I've read the quarterly reports, but I'd love to get your perspective on the client's pain points. The personal touch is always where the real insights come from. Carl nodded approvingly. That's exactly the kind of thinking I want to see. Now, let's get started. Show us what you've got. I pulled up my presentation on the monitor and walked them through the renewal strategy. I had structured it around the client's new budget constraints, offering a tiered approach that would give them flexibility without sacrificing the core services they depended on. I had included projections, case studies, and a timeline for implementation. I felt good about it. Carl listened without interrupting, which was unusual for him. Ethan took notes on a sleek tablet, his stylus gliding across the screen with deliberate precision. When I finished, there was a moment of silence. Interesting approach, Carl said finally. The tiered structure is smart, but I have concerns about the pricing. We're leaving money on the table with the bronze tier. The client's finance department has been pushing for cost savings, I said. If we come in too high, we risk losing the whole contract. This way we keep them locked in for 3 years with options to upgrade. Ethan leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. I actually agree with the tiered approach, but I think we could structure the pricing more aggressively in the middle tier. We want to incentivize them to upgrade, not just maintain their current level. There's a psychological component to pricing that we can leverage. I opened my mouth to respond, but Carl nodded. I like that. Refine the pricing on the middle tier and run the numbers again. Ethan, you work with her on that. Use this week to get fully immersed in the account. Absolutely, Ethan said. He turned to me with that smile. I look forward to learning from you. After the meeting, he caught up with me in the hallway. Hey, do you have time this afternoon to go over the client contact notes? I want to make sure I understand the history before I start weighing in on anything. I can send you the file, I said. It's all in the shared drive. I'd rather sit down with you if that's okay. I'm more of a visual learner. I like to hear the stories behind the numbers. I felt myself soften despite my earlier reservations. He seemed genuine, eager to learn. Sure. I have a meeting at 2, but I'm free after that. Great. I'll stop by your desk. He smiled again and walked away, leaving me standing in the hallway with a strange mixture of pride and unease. The rest of the morning was spent catching up on emails and fielding questions from my team. Sandra came by my desk around 11, holding a mug of tea and looking like she hadn't slept in a week. Heard you got a shadow, she said, settling into the chair across from me. Ethan, he seems nice enough. Sandra snorted. They always seem nice. That's how they get you. You don't like him. I don't like anyone who shows up with a new suit and a fancy degree and expects everyone to roll out the red carpet. He's got his eye on something, mark my words. These MBA types don't come to a place like this to do grunt work. They come to climb. You sound cynical. I sound experienced, she said. I've been here 20 years. I've seen 100 Ethans come and go. They smile at you. They learn everything you know, and then they step right over you on their way to the top. You watch your back. I wanted to dismiss her warning, but something about her tone made me pause. She wasn't being bitter. She was being honest. I'll be careful, I said. You do that. She stood up and walked away, leaving me alone with my doubts. The afternoon meeting with Ethan was productive. He asked good questions, the kind that showed he had actually read the background materials. He was sharp, I had to give him that. By the time we finished, I was starting to feel like having him on the account might actually be a benefit instead of a burden. Thanks for this, he said, closing his notebook. I feel like I have a much better handle on the situation now. Happy to help. Let me know if you have any other questions. Actually, there is one more thing. I noticed the client operations team mentioned something about their internal budget cycle. Is that something you factored into your planning? I hesitated. The budget cycle was sensitive information, something the client had shared with me in confidence. But Ethan was on the account now, and Carl had explicitly asked me to share everything with him. Yes, I said. Their new fiscal year starts in September, and they're expecting a budget increase. I've built that into my projections. That's smart. Can you show me where that information is documented? I opened the shared drive and pulled up the notes I'd taken during my meeting with the operations director. It's all here. Just don't share it outside the team. They were pretty explicit about keeping it internal. Of course. I understand confidentiality. He took his own notes, copying down the details with careful precision. I left the office that evening feeling more optimistic than I had in weeks. The project was coming together, and having Ethan on board was actually making things easier instead of harder. Maybe Sandra was wrong. Maybe he really was just a decent person who wanted to do good work. The next few days followed a similar pattern. Ethan was a constant presence at my desk, asking questions, reviewing documents, picking my brain about every aspect of the account. He was attentive and respectful, always making sure to credit me when he spoke to Carl. I started to trust him, the way you trust a new colleague who seems to have your best interests at heart. But I also started to notice the small things. The way he would pause when I mentioned a client relationship, his eyes sharpening with interest. The way he would ask about my personal life, my stress levels, my family. I told him about my father's forgetfulness in passing, a casual mention of a difficult phone call with my brother. He nodded sympathetically and changed the subject. I didn't think anything of it at the time. The day before the proposal was due, I stayed late to make final adjustments. The office was empty, the cleaning crew already gone. The city lights glowed through the windows, and the quiet was almost peaceful. I opened the pricing file and made the final tweaks, adjusting the numbers to reflect the new information I had about the client's budget. It was a small change, but an important one. I saved the file and locked my computer. Ethan had left an hour earlier, his desk dark and empty. I gathered my things and walked to the elevator, feeling the exhaustion settle into my bones. The next morning, I arrived early to review the proposal one last time. I unlocked my computer, navigated to the shared drive, and opened the folder where I'd saved the file. It was empty. I refreshed the screen. Still empty. My heart started pounding. I clicked through the folder structure, checking every subfolder, every backup location I could think of. Nothing. The file was gone. I opened my personal backup drive and found it empty too. A cold panic washed over me. I called IT, my voice shaking. The technician on the phone was calm, too calm, as he ran the diagnostics. He found a deletion record from the previous night at 7:15 p.m., initiated from my ID. It must have been you, he said. The log shows your credentials. I didn't delete it, I said. I swear I didn't delete it. Maybe you hit something by mistake. It happens. But I can't restore it. The file is gone. I hung up the phone and stared at the blank screen. The meeting was in 2 hours. Carl was expecting a polished proposal. I had nothing. Ethan would be there, watching me fail. And I couldn't prove that I hadn't done it myself. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. I knew, with a certainty that felt like ice in my veins, that Ethan had taken my work. He had used my credentials, deleted my file, and left me with nothing. The question was why. And the answer was obvious. He wanted my account. He wanted to prove himself. And he was willing to step over me to get it. I sat at my desk, my hands trembling, and tried to think of what to do next. There was no proof. There was no way to fight back. I had been outmaneuvered, humiliated, and left with nothing but the knowledge that someone I had trusted had stabbed me in the back. The phone buzzed with a reminder of the meeting. I took a deep breath and stood up. There was only one thing I could do now. Walk into that room and face the consequences. But I was already thinking about what came next. I was already planning how I would fight back. Because I wasn't going to let him win. Not like this. Not without a fight. The sabotage and the diagnosis. The conference room was cold, the way it always was in the mornings before the sun had a chance to warm the glass. I sat at the long table with my empty laptop, my hands folded in front of me, trying to look like I was ready to present something I didn't have. Carl was at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. Ethan sat to his right, his tablet ready, his posture relaxed. The others filed in, a mix of department heads and junior staff who had been invited to witness the big renewal pitch. I cleared my throat. Before we begin, I need to address a technical issue. The proposal file I prepared was deleted from the shared drive last night. I've been working with IT to recover it, but so far they haven't been able to restore the data. The room went quiet. Carl's eyes narrowed. What do you mean, deleted? Someone accessed the drive using my credentials and permanently removed the file. I have no backup. I don't know how it happened. Carl leaned forward, his voice sharp. You're telling me you lost our entire renewal strategy for our biggest client. I'm telling you the file is missing. I didn't delete it myself. Ethan spoke up, his voice measured and sympathetic. That's a tough break. We were all counting on that proposal. He paused, then added, I actually have a contingency plan I've been working on. It's not as comprehensive as what we'd hoped for, but it covers the key points. If you want, I can present it. Carl looked at Ethan, then back at me. You had a backup plan. I wanted to be prepared in case of an emergency, Ethan said smoothly. I've been taking detailed notes during our meetings, and I compiled them into a framework. It's not as polished as the final proposal, but it's something. Go ahead, Carl said. Present what you have. Ethan stood up and plugged his tablet into the projector. His slides appeared on the screen, and my stomach dropped. It was the same structure I had used, the same tiered approach, the same client insights. He had taken my work and repackaged it as his own, stripping away the more detailed financial projections and leaving a skeleton of what I had created. The key here is flexibility, Ethan said, his voice confident. The client is concerned about budget, so we offer them options. The bronze tier maintains their current service levels at a reduced cost. The silver tier gives them additional features and support. The gold tier includes dedicated account management and quarterly strategic reviews. I watched him present, my hands clenched beneath the table. He was using my words, my ideas, my research. But he was doing it better than I could have done with the missing file, because he had removed the most aggressive pricing options and made the whole thing seem more reasonable, more conservative. He was playing to Carl's cautious nature. Carl asked a few questions, and Ethan answered them all with practiced ease. The other department heads nodded along. The junior staff took notes. I sat frozen, unable to speak, unable to interrupt. When Ethan finished, Carl turned to me. Do you have anything to add? I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. What could I say that he had stolen my work, that I had the proof somewhere? If only I could find it. I had nothing. I think Ethan's presentation covers the essentials, I said finally. It's a solid framework. Carl nodded slowly. I'm disappointed about the missing file. We put a lot of resources into this project. But Ethan stepped up when we needed him. That's the kind of initiative I want to see on this team. The meeting ended. People filed out, patting Ethan on the back and congratulating him on a job well done. I gathered my things and walked out without looking at anyone. The hallway was empty. The elevator doors slid open, and I stepped inside, pressing the button for my floor. The doors closed, and I stood there in the small, enclosed space, feeling the walls press in on me. My eyes burned, but I didn't cry. I couldn't. Not here. Not where anyone could see. Back at my desk, I stared at my computer screen. The emails were piling up, but I couldn't focus. I couldn't think. All I could see was Ethan's face as he presented my ideas. All I could hear was Carl's approval. All I could feel was the cold certainty that I had been outmaneuvered, and there was nothing I could do about it. My phone rang. It was my mother. I let it go to voicemail. She called again, and again I didn't pick up. The third time I answered, my voice flat. Hi, Mom. Sweetheart, I need to talk to you. It's about your father. I sat up straighter. What happened? The doctor called. They have the results of the tests we did last week. Her voice was thin, strained. It's not Alzheimer's. It's mild cognitive impairment. They say it's serious, but not the worst-case scenario. I felt the air leave my lungs. When did you get the results? This morning. I wanted to tell you first, before I talked to David. I know how he gets, and I wanted you to hear it from me. What did the doctor say? What's the treatment? She said there are lifestyle changes we can make. Diet and exercise and keeping his mind active. She wants us to come in for a family meeting next week to go over the plan. Her voice cracked. I'm scared, sweetheart. I'm scared of what's going to happen. Don't be scared, I said, though I was terrified myself. We'll figure it out. We'll do whatever we have to do. Promise me you'll come to the family meeting. Promise me you won't let David take over. I promise, Mom. I'll be there. After I hung up, I sat at my desk and tried to breathe. My father had mild cognitive impairment. It was a diagnosis that changed everything. It meant he would need more help, more supervision, more care. It meant my mother would be carrying a burden she wasn't prepared to carry alone. And I knew, with a sinking certainty, that David would make this his project. He would take over, organize everything, schedule appointments, and make decisions without consulting anyone. He would treat my parents like they were children who needed to be managed. I couldn't let that happen. Not to my mother, not to my father. They had spent their whole lives taking care of us. It was our turn to take care of them, the right way, the way they wanted. But first, I had to survive work. I had to find a way to fight back against Ethan, to prove that I wasn't the one who had made the mistake. I opened my email and typed a message to IT, asking for a detailed log of all access to the shared drive over the past week. I needed to prove that someone else had been in the system. I needed to find a way to clear my name. By the time I left the office that evening, I had made zero progress. The IT department was backlogged. No one had responded to my request. I walked to my car in the dark, the cold wind biting at my face, and I wondered how much more of this I could take. At home, Mark was waiting with dinner on the table. He gave me a long look as I walked in the door, his eyes soft with concern. Rough day, you could say that. I told him everything. The missing file, the proposal, Ethan's presentation, the diagnosis, the fear that I was losing control at work and at home. He listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he put his arms around me. You can't prove it was him, he said. That's the hardest part. I know. But you can prove it wasn't you. You just need the right evidence. What if there is no evidence? What if he covered his tracks so well that there's nothing I can do? Then you find another way, Mark said. You're smarter than him. You're more patient. You wait for him to make a mistake, and then you use it. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to think that there was a way out of this mess, that I could find some piece of evidence that would exonerate me and expose Ethan for what he was. But the fear was still there, a knot in my chest that wouldn't untie. The next morning, I called my mother to confirm the family meeting. She told me David had already called the doctor and scheduled it himself. He had moved the date up by 2 days, and he had changed the location to his office instead of the clinic. He says it's easier for everyone, my mother said. He says he can have the doctor call in on video. He says it's more efficient. Did you want to have it at his office? No, but he didn't ask. He just told me. I felt the familiar anger rising in my chest. I'll handle it, I said. I'll call the doctor and have it moved back to the clinic. Don't argue with him, sweetheart. You know how he gets. I don't care how he gets. This is about Dad, not about David. I called the doctor's office and spoke to the administrator. She was apologetic but firm. David had already canceled the clinic appointment and scheduled the remote meeting. The only way to change it back was to get David to agree. I called David. He answered on the second ring, his voice distracted. Can I call you back? I'm in a meeting. This will just take a minute. I need to talk to you about Dad's appointment. Already handled. We're having a family meeting at my office on Thursday. It's all arranged. I want it at the clinic. Mom wants it at the clinic. Why did you change it without asking anyone? Because I'm the one who's managing this. I'm the one who talked to the doctor. I'm the one who's making the arrangements. We're all in this together, David. You don't get to make unilateral decisions. Listen, I'm not trying to steamroll you. I'm just trying to be efficient. You have a lot going on at work, I know that. I'm trying to take the burden off you. Don't do that, I said. Don't pretend you're doing this for me. There was a pause. I'm doing this for Mom and Dad, he said finally. I'm doing what's best for them. And I know you don't think I do, but I care about them just as much as you do. I know you do, I said. But that doesn't give you the right to make all the decisions. I'm not making all the decisions. I'm just making the ones that need to be made. There's a difference. The conversation went in circles for another 10 minutes. He wouldn't budge. I wouldn't back down. In the end, we agreed to disagree, and I hung up the phone feeling more defeated than ever. I had lost at work. I was losing at home. And I didn't know how to stop the spiral. The smear campaign the week after the presentation was the longest of my life. Carl didn't call me into his office, didn't send me an email, didn't even look at me when we passed in the hallway. But the message was clear. I had been sidelined. The Baker account, my account, the one I had nurtured for 3 years, was now Ethan's. And with it went my team, my standing, my future at the company. The first sign was the meeting assignments. My senior analyst, a quiet young woman named Priya who had been with me for 2 years, was reassigned to Ethan's project. I got the notification in the morning, a terse email from HR informing me that Priya's workload had been rebalanced. No one asked my opinion. No one consulted me. The second sign was the project I was given in place of the Baker account. It was a menial task, the kind of thing we usually gave to interns or temporary staff. A spreadsheet of vendor records that needed to be verified and cleaned up. Hundreds of entries, each one requiring manual review. It was tedious, mind-numbing work that had no strategic value whatsoever. I sat at my desk and stared at the spreadsheet, the rows and columns blurring before my eyes. This was the message. This was what Carl thought of me now. Not a senior project manager, not a trusted advisor. Just a pair of hands that could be used for grunt work. Sandra came by my desk around mid-morning. She had a cup of tea in one hand and a sympathetic look on her face. I heard about the reassignment, she said. I'm sorry. Thanks. It's not your fault. No, but I know how it feels. I've been there. They push you aside, give you the scraps, wait for you to quit. Are you telling me to quit? I'm telling you to be smart, she said. Don't let them win by walking away. Make them fire you if they want to get rid of you. And in the meantime, keep your eyes open. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. I heard something interesting. Ethan was in a meeting with Carl yesterday. They were talking about your performance. Carl mentioned that you seemed distracted, that there had been some personal issues. Ethan said he'd noticed the same thing. He told Carl that you'd been talking about family stress, a sick parent or something. He made it sound like you were overwhelmed. The blood drained from my face. I mentioned my father to him once. In passing. He had no right to use that against me. That's what I'm saying. He's building a narrative. You're the burned-out manager who can't handle the pressure. He's the fresh talent who stepped in to save the day. It's classic corporate sabotage. I stared at my screen, the spreadsheet still open, the rows of data mocking me. What am I supposed to do? I don't know. But if I were you, I'd start documenting everything. Every conversation, every email, every time he takes credit for something that isn't his. And don't share anything with him that you don't have to. I nodded, but my mind was racing. Ethan had not only stolen my work, he was actively destroying my reputation. He was making me look like a liability, someone who couldn't handle the job. And the worst part was, it was working. The next day, I went to the break room to refill my coffee. Ethan was there, standing by the window with his phone in his hand. He smiled when he saw me, the same easy, confident smile he always wore. Hey, how are you doing? He asked. Haven't seen you around much. I've been busy with my new project. The vendor records. Yeah, that's a tough one. But hey, someone's got to do it. I felt the anger rise in my chest. It's not exactly what I was hoping for. But I'm sure you understand. You've got the Baker account now, after all. That's not how I see it, he said smoothly. We're a team. I'm just keeping the seat warm until you get your head back on straight. Carl knows you've been dealing with a lot. I turned to face him, the coffee cup forgotten in my hand. What do you know about what I'm dealing with? He shrugged, his expression innocent. Just what you told me. Your father's health, family stress. It's understandable. These things happen. Nobody's judging you. Nobody's judging me. Is that why I've been assigned to clean up duty? Is that why my entire team was reassigned to you? He didn't flinch. He kept that smile on his face, that perfect, practiced smile that made me want to scream. That was Carl's decision, not mine. I told him you were a valuable member of the team. I said you just needed some time to get back on track. I couldn't hold it in anymore. You stole my work. You deleted my file and presented it as your own. And now you're telling everyone I'm burned out so you can take my account. I know what you're doing, Ethan. I know exactly what you're doing. His smile flickered, just for a moment. Then it was back, more serene than ever. That's a serious accusation. I'd be careful about making statements like that if I were you. You don't want people to think you're unstable. Unstable. Look, I'm not trying to attack you, he said, his voice still calm and reasonable. I'm just saying, you've been under a lot of pressure. Maybe you're misreading things. Maybe you made a mistake and you're looking for someone to blame. It happens. It's a stressful time for you. He said it loud enough for the two people in the break room to hear. They were pretending not to listen, but I could see their eyes flickering between us. The narrative he was building was being reinforced with every word. I walked out of the break room without saying another word. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding. I felt like I was losing my mind, like I was being gaslit by someone who was so good at manipulation that he could make me doubt my own memory. Back at my desk, I sat down and closed my eyes. Sandra's words echoed in my head. Document everything. Don't share anything you don't have to. Be smart. But what was the point of documenting anything if no one would believe me? What was the point of fighting back if I was already losing? The phone rang. It was my mother. I answered, my voice flat. Sweetheart, I need to talk to you about the meeting. David just called me. He's already scheduled a tour of a facility for next week. What facility? An assisted living place. He says he wants us to be prepared for the future, that we should have options in place. He's moving ahead without us. We haven't even had the family meeting yet. I know. I told him we weren't ready. He said we'd never be ready, that someone had to make the hard decisions. I felt the anger surge back, displacing the despair. I'll talk to him. I'll make him wait. Don't fight with him, sweetheart. It only makes things worse. He gets defensive and then he gets stubborn. You know how he is. I know how he is. But I'm not going to let him railroad you and Dad into something you don't want. That's not going to happen. I hung up the phone and stared at the spreadsheet on my screen. The vendor records blurred and swam before my eyes. I had to do something. I had to find a way to regain control, to stop the spiral that was pulling me under. That evening, I told Mark about the conversation with my mother. He listened quietly, then put his hand on my shoulder. You can't fight both battles at once, he said. You have to pick one. What does that mean? It means you're trying to deal with your brother and your boss at the same time, and you're exhausting yourself. Pick the one you can win. The one that matters most. I thought about it. My father's diagnosis was serious, but it wasn't an emergency. We had time to figure out the best approach. But work was a different story. If I didn't fight back against Ethan, I would be out of a job within months. And without a job, I couldn't help my parents. I couldn't support anyone. I need to focus on work, I said. If I can't prove what he did, then I need to find another way. I need to catch him in a mistake, something I can use. And then what? Then I show Carl who he really is. And I get my career back. Mark nodded slowly. Okay, then that's what you do. But don't forget about your family. They need you too. I knew he was right. But I also knew that if I didn't protect myself, I wouldn't be able to protect anyone else. The betrayal at work and the fight with my brother were connected, tied together by the same thread. I was being pushed down on both sides, and I had to push back. I spent the weekend reviewing every email I had exchanged with Ethan. I looked for patterns, inconsistencies, anything that might suggest impropriety. I found small things, minor things. Nothing that would prove he had stolen my work. But I did find something else. An email he had sent to the client's operations manager, asking for a meeting away from the usual channels. It was a request, not a confirmation, but it was enough to raise my suspicions. He was trying to meet with the client without my knowledge. He was trying to cut me out. I didn't know if it was enough to use. But I saved a copy, just in case. The week went on. The vendor records were slowly getting cleaned up, line by line. My mother called every day, reporting on David's latest initiatives. He was researching facilities, talking to lawyers, making plans. I tried to reassure her, but my own anxiety was building with each passing day. And then, on Friday afternoon, I got the news. Carl had given Ethan the Baker account outright. I had been officially removed from the project. The title was gone. The responsibilities were gone. The future I had been building for 3 years was gone. I sat at my desk, the spreadsheet open in front of me, and felt the world tilt. I had lost. He had won. There was nothing I could do about it. Or so I thought. Because that evening, Sandra came to my desk with a printout in her hand. I found this in the shared printer, she said. It was left there accidentally. It's from Ethan's email. I took the printout and read it. It was an email from Ethan to the client's operations manager, proposing a direct contract with a separate consulting firm. He was trying to take the client away from our company, to steal the account entirely. My heart started beating faster. This was it. This was the mistake I had been waiting for. If I could prove that Ethan was trying to poach the client, Carl would have to act. He wouldn't protect someone who was actively damaging the company. I looked at Sandra. Do you know what this is? She nodded slowly. I know. I've been waiting for him to slip. And now he has. I folded the printout and put it in my drawer. I didn't know exactly how I would use it yet, but I knew that I finally had a way to fight back. The hidden camera and the old ledger. I spent the weekend thinking about the printout Sandra had given me. It was evidence, yes, but it wasn't enough on its own. Ethan could claim it was a draft, a proposal that never went anywhere, a misunderstanding. I needed more. I needed something that would leave Carl with no choice, but to act. The first thing I did was call my mother. She answered on the first ring, her voice thin with worry. Sweetheart, is everything okay? Everything's fine, Mom. I need to come by and pick up something. Some old papers Dad has in the closet. What kind of papers? Nothing important. Just some records I need to look at. Family stuff. She didn't ask any more questions. She was used to me digging through their things, helping with the taxes, organizing the files. It was a role I had fallen into years ago, the practical one, the one who handled the details. When I arrived at my parents' house on Saturday morning, my father was sitting in his recliner watching a game show. He looked up when I walked in and smiled, but it took him a moment to remember my name. Hi, Dad. It's me. I know who you are, he said, but I could see the confusion behind his eyes. You're my daughter. The one who does the taxes. That's right. I'm going to look at some papers in the closet. Help yourself. Your mother's in the kitchen. My mother was at the counter, slicing vegetables for a stew. She turned when I came in and wiped her hands on her apron. Are you sure everything's okay? You look tired. I'm fine, Mom. I'm just dealing with some things at work. Nothing you need to worry about. You're always dealing with things at work. You work too hard. You should take some time off. Come to church with us on Sunday. Maybe next Sunday, I said. Right now, I just need to find those papers. The closet in my parents' bedroom was crammed with boxes, old suitcases, and stacks of things that should have been thrown away years ago. I found what I was looking for in the back corner, a cardboard box labeled Georgia Stuff in my mother's neat handwriting. Inside were old pay stubs, union newsletters, and a faded ledger that must have been 30 years old. I sat on the floor and opened the ledger. The pages were yellowed, the handwriting careful and precise. It was my father's record of his years as a postal worker, documenting everything from shift schedules to union grievances. I read through the entries, trying to understand the man he had been before the memory problems started. There was one entry that caught my attention. A meeting with management about working conditions, the kind of thing that would have been small and insignificant to anyone else, but clearly mattered to him. He had written down every word, every promise, every response. He had been fighting for something, standing up for himself and his coworkers. I closed the ledger and held it in my hands. It wasn't the proof I needed for work, not by a long shot. But it was something else, something I hadn't expected. It was a reminder of who my father had been, the man who had built a life on principle and hard work. I tucked the ledger under my arm and walked back to the living room. My father was still watching the game show, but his eyes were closed now, his breathing slow and even. I stood there for a moment, watching him sleep, and felt the familiar ache in my chest. We'll take care of you, Dad, I whispered. I promise. That afternoon, I went back to my office. It was empty, the way it always was on weekends, and I had the building to myself. I walked through the quiet hallways, past the dark cubicles, to the storage closet on the third floor. Sandra had given me the key. She had mentioned it casually, almost as an afterthought, as if she had known I would need it eventually. There's a closet on 3, she had said. Old, decommissioned laptops. They never throw anything away. Might be useful if you need to find something. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The closet was small and dusty, filled with boxes of old equipment and files. I pushed aside a stack of broken monitors and found a shelf of laptops, their screens cracked, their keyboards sticky with age. I worked my way through them, looking for anything that might be salvageable. Most of them were dead, their hard drives wiped clean. But then I found one, a battered laptop with a dented corner, that still had a flicker of life in its screen. I plugged it in and waited. The machine groaned to life, the startup sequence slow and painful. It asked for a password. I tried the standard ones, the default settings that IT always used, and eventually found one that worked. The desktop appeared, cluttered with old files and abandoned projects. I opened the file directory and started searching. It took me an hour, but eventually I found what I was looking for. A backup folder from a server log, accidentally stored on this machine. I opened the folder and scanned the contents. It was a record of login times and file access from the week my proposal was deleted. There, in black and white, was the entry I had been searching for. A user logged in at 7:15 p.m. on the night of the deletion. The ID was mine. But the MAC address, the unique identifier of the computer used, was different. I pulled out my phone and took a photo of the log. The evidence wasn't perfect, but it was something. It proved that someone had used my credentials from a different computer. It proved that the deletion wasn't my fault. I sat back on the dusty floor and let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. I had proof. It wasn't enough to prove Ethan was the one who did it, not by itself. But it was enough to raise questions. It was enough to make Carl doubt. That Monday morning, I went to Sandra's desk before the day started. She was already there, sipping her tea and reading the news on her computer. "I found something," I said. "A log from the night the file was deleted. It shows someone used my ID from a different computer." Sandra's eyes lit up. "That's good. That's really good." Ethan's computer wasn't in the system. I checked. He was using his personal laptop that week, the one he brought from Chicago. IT has a record of it. So you can prove it wasn't you, but you can't prove it was him. For now. But it's a start. It gives me leverage. Sandra nodded slowly. "Be careful with this. Carl is going to want to sweep it under the rug. He doesn't like messy situations. Make sure you present it in a way that gives him a reason to act." I spent the rest of the week preparing. I wrote up a formal request for IT to investigate the log, including the MAC address discrepancy. I documented every detail, every conversation, every piece of evidence I had gathered. I built a case that would be impossible to ignore. But I didn't present it yet. I needed to wait for the right moment. The family meeting was that Thursday. I drove to my parents' house to pick them up, determined to make sure they arrived together. David was already at his office when we got there, standing by the conference table with the doctor on a video screen. "Dad, Mom, sit here," David said, gesturing to the chairs in front of the camera. "The doctor is ready to go over the results." The meeting was clinical and cold. The doctor explained the diagnosis, the symptoms, the treatment options. She recommended regular cognitive assessments, a strict diet and exercise regimen, and careful monitoring of his medication. She suggested that the family consider making arrangements for the future. David jumped in immediately. "We've already started looking at assisted living facilities. There are some excellent options in my area, close to me, so I can check in regularly." "No," my father said, his voice sharp. "I'm not going to assisted living. I'm staying in my house." David sighed, the sound heavy with impatience. "Dad, we've been over this. You need more help than Mom can give you. We need to think about what's best for you." "What's best for me is staying in my own house, where I've lived for 40 years, my father said. "I'm not moving." My mother reached for my hand under the table. I squeezed it, then spoke up. "There are other options. Home care, visiting aides, day programs. We don't have to jump straight to a facility." "Home care is expensive," David said. "And it's unreliable. We've already discussed this." "We haven't discussed anything," I said. "You've been making decisions without us." "That's not discussing. That's dictating." The room went quiet. David stared at me, his jaw tight. The doctor on the screen shifted uncomfortably. "Perhaps we should focus on the immediate treatment plan," the doctor said. "We can revisit the housing discussion in a few months." "No," David said. "We need to make a decision now. We can't keep putting this off." I pulled out my phone and opened the photo of the ledger I had taken, the page where my father had documented his fight with management. I didn't show it to anyone. I just looked at it, remembered who he was, and spoke. Dad fought his whole life for what he believed in, I said. He didn't back down then. He's not going to back down now. Neither am I. David stared at me, and for a moment I saw something I hadn't expected. Not anger, not frustration. Something softer, almost like fear. You think I'm trying to push him into something he doesn't want? David asked. I'm trying to protect him. That's all I've ever been trying to do. I know, I said. But you can't protect him by taking away his choices. That's not how this works. The meeting ended with no resolution. David agreed to hold off on the facility search for a month, and I agreed to look into in-home care options. It was a truce, not a victory, but it was something. After the meeting, my mother hugged me in the parking lot. Thank you, sweetheart. Thank you for standing up to him. He loves you, Mom. He just has a funny way of showing it. I know he does. But sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes you need someone to fight for you. I drove my parents home and helped my father settle into his recliner. He was tired, but there was a lightness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. You did good, he said. You fought for me. I smiled and kissed his forehead. Always, Dad. Always. That night, I sat in my living room with the ledger in my hands. It was a small thing, just an old book full of old details. But it was also a reminder of who my father was and what he had taught me. He had taught me to fight for what was right, even when it wasn't easy. He had taught me to stand up for myself and for the people I loved. And that was exactly what I was going to do. The confrontation and the day after the family meeting, I went to David's office. I didn't call first. I didn't tell anyone I was coming. I just got in my car and drove to his building, a sleek glass tower in the business district that always made me feel small when I walked through its doors. The receptionist at the front desk recognized me. She smiled politely and told me David was in a meeting. I said I'd wait. So I sat in the lobby, watching the well-dressed people come and go, and waited for the meeting to end. It took 40 minutes. David finally emerged, walking with his clients toward the elevator. He looked surprised to see me, but he didn't say anything until the clients were gone. What are you doing here? He asked, his voice carefully neutral. I need to talk to you. Privately. He studied my face for a moment, then nodded. My office. I followed him down the hallway, past the glass-walled conference rooms and the expensive art on the walls. His office was at the end, a corner suite with a view of the river. He closed the door behind us and gestured to a chair. I didn't sit. I stayed standing, my hands at my sides, trying to keep my voice steady. Everything changed with Dad's diagnosis, I said. I know that. But the way you've been handling it isn't fair to him or to Mom. David leaned against his desk, his arms crossed. I'm doing what needs to be done. Someone has to. Someone has to make decisions. But not all the decisions. Not without talking to anyone else. Are you saying I haven't been talking to you? I'm saying you've been making choices without consulting anyone. You scheduled the meeting without asking me. You changed the location without asking Mom. You've been looking at facilities without telling either of us what you found. David sighed, the sound heavy with frustration. You don't get it, do you? The burden of this is on me. I have to make the hard calls because no one else will. That's not true. I would have helped if you had asked. He shook his head slowly. You've been checked out for months. You're always stressed about work. You're always tired. I didn't want to add to your load. I felt the familiar sting of his dismissal. But I didn't let it stop me. I haven't been checked out, I said. I've been trying to keep everything together, at work and at home. But you don't see that because you're too busy taking over. You've already written me off as the unreliable one. The one who can't handle it. David opened his mouth to respond, but I kept going. I've been dealing with something at work. Something that's been tearing me apart. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to burden you. But you need to understand that I haven't been checked out. I've been fighting. He was silent for a moment. Then, what's going on at work? So I told him. Everything. The stolen file, the proposal, Ethan's smear campaign. The demotion, the grunt work, the evidence I had gathered. I told him about Sandra and the printout, the old laptop and the MAC address log. I told him about the feeling of being betrayed by someone I had trusted. He listened without interrupting. His face changed as I spoke, the hard lines softening into something I hadn't seen in a long time. Sympathy, maybe? Or understanding. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Why didn't you tell me this before?" "Because you never ask. Because you've always treated me like I'm not capable." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I remembered from when we were teenagers. It was the way he looked when he was wrestling with something he didn't want to admit. "I don't do this out of malice," he said finally. "I do it because I'm scared. I'm scared they're going to need more care than we can give. I'm scared something is going to happen and I won't be able to fix it." "I'm scared too," I said. "But that doesn't mean we have to fight." He looked at me, really looked, and I saw something shift in his expression. The wall he had built between us, the one I had thought was impenetrable, was cracking. "You think I'd just bulldoze you out of spite?" he asked. "I do it because I don't know how else to help. I don't know how to be soft. That's not who I am." "Then learn," I said. "For Mom and Dad. For us." We stood there in silence, the weight of years between us. Then he nodded. "Just barely. 2 months, he said. "I'll hold off on the facility search for 2 months. You arrange the in-home evaluation. You handle Mom's emotional needs, and I'll handle Dad's medical appointments. We'll share the load." "That's fair," I said. "And at work, you need to do something about this Ethan guy. You can't let him keep pushing you around." "I have a plan. I just need to find the right time." "Then do it. And let me know if you need help." It wasn't a warm reconciliation. It wasn't a hug and a promise that everything would be okay. But it was something. A truce built on shared fear and grudging respect. It was more than I had expected. That evening, I sat at my desk at home and reviewed the evidence I had gathered. The log, the printout, the records of Ethan's moves. I had enough to make a case, but I wanted to be strategic. I wanted to present it in a way that would leave Carl with no choice. The next morning, I went to Carl's office. I had sent him an email the night before, requesting a meeting. He had accepted, probably because he was curious about what I had to say. "Sit down," he said when I walked in. "What's this about?" I placed the folder on his desk. Inside were copies of the log, the email to the client, and a summary of the evidence I had gathered. "I've been investigating what happened to the proposal file," I said. "The one that was deleted. I've found evidence that proves I wasn't the one who deleted it." Carl opened the folder and started reading. His expression was unreadable. "This shows that someone used my ID from a different computer," I said. "The MAC address doesn't match any of the company machines. That means someone had access to my credentials and used them to delete the file." "Could it have been a glitch?" Carl asked. "A mistake in the logging system." IT checked the logs. "They're accurate. Someone did this deliberately." Carl looked at me, his eyes sharp. "Do you have any idea who?" I took a breath. "I have a theory, but I don't have proof. Not yet." The rest of the conversation was careful and measured. Carl was cautious, as I had expected. He didn't like messy situations. But I could see that the evidence was giving him pause. That afternoon, Sandra came to my desk. Her face was flushed with excitement. Something happened," she said. "Ethan just got called into Carl's office. It's been over an hour." I felt my heart speed up. "Did you see what happened?" "Not exactly. But I heard Carl's assistant talking. Something about a client complaint. Someone noticed that the proposal numbers weren't matching up. They're digging." I didn't say anything, but I knew what this meant. Ethan had made a mistake. He had used the wrong version of my numbers, the ones I had updated before the deletion. The client had caught it. Now Carl was investigating. Sandra handed me a piece of paper. It was a copy of the log I had found, the one with the mismatched MAC address. "I took the liberty of forwarding this to Carl's assistant," she said. "I thought he might find it interesting." I looked at her surprised. "You did that without asking me." "I did it because you needed someone to help you fight back. You were too careful, too patient. Sometimes you need to push." I didn't know whether to thank her or be angry. But I didn't have time to think about it. Because at that moment, Carl's assistant appeared at my desk. "Carl wants to see you in his office." "Now." I walked down the hallway, my heart pounding in my chest. The door was open. Carl was at his desk, and across from him sat Ethan. His face was pale, his usual composure gone. Sit down, Carl said. I took the seat next to Ethan. Carl looked between us, his expression grim. I've been reviewing the evidence, Carl said. The log files, the client complaints, the emails. It paints a picture I don't like. Ethan opened his mouth to speak, but Carl held up a hand. I don't want excuses. I want the truth. Who deleted the proposal file? Ethan looked at me, his face full of anger and fear. Then he looked at Carl and his shoulders slumped. It was a mistake, he said. I was working late and I thought I was deleting a draft. I didn't mean to delete the final file. Did you also mean to send that email to the client? Carl asked. The one where you offered to consult with them directly. Ethan's face went white. I can explain that. It was just a proposal. It never went anywhere. The client forwarded it to me, Carl said. They didn't appreciate being approached by someone who was supposed to be working for them. They're considering ending their contract with us. I felt a surge of satisfaction, but I kept my face neutral. Carl wasn't done. Ethan, you're on administrative leave pending a full investigation. I'll have more to say next week. You're dismissed. Ethan stood up and walked out of the room without looking at me. Carl turned to me, his expression softening. I should have listened to you sooner, he said. I'm sorry. I didn't say anything. I just nodded and walked out of the room, my heart still pounding. I had won. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like relief. That evening, I called David and told him what had happened. He listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he said, Good. That's good. Now we can both focus on what matters. Are you still mad at me? I was never mad at you. I was just scared. I thought about that for a moment. Then I said, we should have talked to each other a long time ago. Yeah, he said. Probably. We hung up, and I sat in the quiet of my living room, feeling the weight of the past few months start to lift. The battle wasn't over. There was still work to do, still fights to fight. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was on the right side of the line. And that was enough. For now, that was enough. The restoration and the fallout the week after Ethan was put on administrative leave passed in a strange kind of quiet. The office felt different, the tension that had been building for months slowly dissipating. People stopped whispering when I walked by. The glances I got were no longer pitying or suspicious. They were just normal, the way they used to be. Sandra came to my desk on Monday morning with a cup of coffee and a small smile. You did it. He's gone. He's on leave, I corrected. That's not the same as gone. He's gone, she said firmly. I heard from HR. They're not bringing him back. The client complaint was the final straw. Carl can't afford to keep someone who is trying to poach his biggest account. I took the coffee and sipped it. It was too sweet, the way Sandra always made it, but I didn't mind. Thanks for forwarding that log, I said. I didn't ask you to do that, but it helped. I know you didn't ask. That's why I did it. Someone had to push. I nodded, not sure what else to say. Sandra had been the one person who had believed me from the beginning, the one who had warned me about Ethan and given me the tools to fight back. I would be grateful to her for a long time. I heard you're getting a new account, Sandra said. Not the baker one, but something smaller. Carl's trying to make it up to you. I don't need him to make it up to me. I just need to do my job. She laughed, the sound warm and genuine. That's exactly the right attitude. You're going to be fine. Later that morning, Carl called me into his office. He had the folder I had given him open on his desk, the evidence still spread out in front of him. Ethan Hayes will not be returning to the company, he said without preamble. The investigation confirmed what you already knew. He deleted your file. He was trying to steal the account. He's been terminated effective immediately. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, but I kept my face calm. Thank you for telling me. I should have handled this differently from the start, Carl said. I should have believed you. I let myself be swayed by his presentation, his confidence. That was my mistake. I'm not looking for an apology, I said. I just want to move on. He nodded, his expression thoughtful. I'm giving you the Richards account. It's smaller than Baker, but it's a solid client with growth potential. You'll have a team of your own. And I'm increasing your title to senior director. You've earned it. I blinked, surprised. I wasn't expecting that. I know. That's why you deserve it. I walked out of his office feeling lighter than I had in months. The promotion was unexpected, but it wasn't what mattered. What mattered was that my reputation was restored, that people would stop looking at me like I was a liability. But the promotion also meant more work, more responsibility, more hours. I thought about my parents, about the promise I had made to my mother. I couldn't let the job consume me the way it had before. That weekend, I went to my parents' house to set up the in-home evaluation. The social worker was kind and thorough, asking questions about my father's daily routine and his medication schedule. She looked around the house, noting the stairs and the bathroom and the things that might become obstacles as the disease progressed. The good news is that your father is still in the early stages, she said. With the right support, he can live at home for years. You'll need to make some modifications, but nothing too drastic. My mother was beaming. I told you, sweetheart. We don't need to move anywhere. We just need a little help. I hugged her, feeling the fragility of her frame. You'll get all the help you need, Mom. I promise. That afternoon, my mother made lunch and we sat around the kitchen table the way we used to when I was a child. My father was quiet, his attention drifting, but there were moments of clarity that gave me hope. He remembered my name, my brother's name, the names of the neighbors who had lived next door for 30 years. The memories were still there, buried under the fog. David called that evening. He had been checking in more often since our conversation at his office, and the calls were no longer tense and argumentative. They were just calls, the way they should have been all along. How did the evaluation go? He asked. Good, I said. The social worker thinks he can stay at home for a long time. We just need to make some changes. So I can stop looking at facilities for now, I said. But we should still keep our options open. Things could change. I know, he said. I'm not going to pretend they won't. But for now, this is what Mom and Dad want. And that's what matters. I hung up the phone and sat in my living room, the quiet settling around me like a blanket. Mark came in from the kitchen and sat beside me on the couch. Everything okay? Everything's fine, I said. Better than fine, actually. He put his arm around me, and I leaned into him. What happens now, I don't know, I said. I guess we just keep going. One day at a time. That was the truth, and it was enough. I didn't need to have all the answers. I just needed to keep moving forward, to keep fighting for the people I loved and the life I wanted. The next week, Carl held a department meeting to announce the changes. Ethan was gone. The Baker account was being reassigned to a team from the Chicago office. I was officially the new senior director, with my own accounts and my own staff. After the meeting, a few of my colleagues came up to congratulate me. Priya, the analyst who had been reassigned to Ethan's project, was the first. I'm glad you're back, she said. It wasn't the same with him. Thank you, I said. I'm glad to be back too. The rest of the week was a blur of meetings and paperwork and catching up on everything I had missed. But I made a promise to myself that I wouldn't let the job consume me the way it had before. I would leave at a reasonable hour. I would take lunch breaks. I would call my mother every day. And I did. The calls became a routine, a touchstone that kept me grounded. My mother would tell me about her garden and her church group and the small dramas of her daily life. My father would sometimes be there, sometimes not, but it didn't matter. I was present. That was what counted. 2 weeks after Ethan was terminated, I got an email from him. It was short, almost formal, but there was an undercurrent of anger in the words. I know you think you won, it said. But you didn't. You just delayed the inevitable. People like you always lose in the end. I read the email twice, then deleted it. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. His words were hollow, the desperate attempt of someone who had lost everything and couldn't accept it. Mark asked me about it that evening. Are you okay? I'm fine, I said. He's just trying to get a reaction. I'm not going to give him one. That's the right attitude, Mark said. You've moved on. He hasn't. I knew he was right. I had moved on. The betrayal still stung, but it no longer defined me. I had taken the worst he could throw at me and come out the other side. The family barbecue was my mother's idea. She wanted to celebrate the anniversary properly, she said, with everyone together and no arguments. David and Lisa came, bringing a fruit salad and a bottle of wine that was almost certainly too expensive. Mark and I brought burgers and potato salad. My father sat in his favorite lawn chair, watching the kids play in the yard. He was quieter than he used to be, but there was a contentment in his eyes that I hadn't seen in a long time. Thank you, my mother said to me as we were clearing the plates. For everything. For standing up to David. For helping us stay in our house. It wasn't just me, I said. David helped too. He stopped pushing. I know, she said. But it was you who changed things. You who made him listen. You always were the one who could reach him, even when he didn't want to be reached. I looked at my brother, laughing with Lisa across the yard. He caught my eye and raised his glass in a small salute. I raised mine back. After the barbecue was over, Mark and I walked home. The evening light was soft, the air warm and heavy with the scent of summer. We didn't talk much, just walked side by side, the way we had 1,000 times before. When we reached our front door, Mark paused. Are you satisfied with how everything turned out? I thought about it. Satisfied wasn't the right word. I wasn't the hero of the story. I hadn't made a grand speech or won a sweeping victory. I had been pushed down, fought back, and salvaged what I could. My parents were still in their house. My brother and I were speaking. My career was back on track, though not at the level it had been before. I think I'm just relieved, I said. That's enough. He nodded and opened the door. We walked into the quiet of our home, the way we always did. The next morning, I woke up early and made coffee. The sun was just rising, casting pale light across the kitchen. I sat at the table and thought about everything that had happened. The betrayals, the fights, the small victories. It hadn't been easy, and I knew it wouldn't get easier. But I was still standing. My family was still together. That was more than I had dared to hope for. Mark came downstairs and kissed my forehead. What are you thinking about? Nothing, I said. Everything. The usual. He poured himself a cup of coffee and sat across from me. What do you want to do today? I don't know, I said. Maybe we should go see my parents. Take them out to lunch. That sounds good. We finished our coffee and got ready. The days stretched ahead of us, ordinary and unremarkable. And that was exactly what I wanted. No more secrets, no more betrayals, no more battles. Just a normal life, with all its ups and downs. The drive to my parents' house was familiar, the streets I had known my whole life. My mother was already in the garden when we arrived, her hands in the dirt. My father was on the porch, reading a book he would probably forget by dinner. Look who's here, my mother called out, wiping her hands on her apron. I was just thinking about you. We thought we'd take you to lunch, I said. That sounds wonderful. Let me get changed. George, put your book down. We're going out. My father looked up, confused for a moment, then smiled. Where are we going to lunch? I said. All of us. He nodded and stood up slowly. All right. That sounds nice. We drove to the diner my parents used to take us to when we were children. The booths were worn, the menu stained, but my mother beamed when we walked through the door. Remember this place? She asked. You and David used to fight over who got the last milkshake. I remember, I said. David always won. You were too nice to fight back, she said. That was always your problem. I laughed and slid into the booth across from them. Mark sat beside me, his hand on my knee under the table. My father was already studying the menu, his brow furrowed. What's good here? He asked. Everything, my mother said. Just pick something. We ordered and ate and talked about nothing important. The weather, the garden, the news. It was ordinary and simple and perfect. On the way home, Mark looked at me. You seem different. Do I? More at peace, he said. Like some of the weight is gone. I thought about it. He was right. The weight was still there, but it was lighter, easier to carry. I had survived everything that had been thrown at me, and I had come out the other side. Maybe it is, I said. Maybe I just needed to remember who I was. We drove the rest of the way in comfortable silence. And I knew in that moment that whatever came next, I would be okay. The barbecue was over. The dishes were done. My mother had insisted on washing everything by hand, the way she always did, and I had stood beside her at the sink, drying each plate and cup as she handed them to me. The kitchen smelled like grilled meat and lemon-scented soap, a combination that felt like childhood. Lisa and David had left an hour earlier, David shaking my hand and holding it a moment longer than usual. "We'll talk next week," he said. "About the house and the care plan. Together." I had nodded, and he had walked away without another word. It was a small thing, that handshake, but it felt like a promise. A new beginning, built on the ruins of everything we had fought about. My father was already asleep in his recliner, the television still flickering with the muted images of a late-night news program. My mother draped a blanket over him and kissed his forehead. He stirred, but didn't wake. "He's tired," she said softly. "But he's happy." That's all I ever wanted. I hugged her goodbye at the front door, feeling the familiar softness of her shoulders, the familiar scent of her perfume. "I'll call you tomorrow," I said. "You always do," she said. "That's why I love you." Mark and I walked home under the streetlights, the neighborhood quiet and still. The air was cool, the first hint of autumn creeping into the edges of the night. We didn't talk much, just walked side by side, our footsteps synchronized in the silence. When we reached our front door, I paused and looked back at the house where I had grown up. The lights were still on in the living room, a small beacon in the darkness. "What are you thinking about?" Mark asked. "I'm thinking about how much I almost lost," I said. "And how much I got back." He put his arm around my shoulders. "That's not a bad thing to think about." We went inside, and I locked the door behind us. The house was quiet, the way it always was at this hour. I sat on the couch and let the silence settle around me. I hadn't become a hero. I hadn't gotten the last word or the grand victory. The promotion at work was nice, but it wasn't what mattered. What mattered was that my parents were still in their house, still living the life they had chosen. What mattered was that my brother and I had finally stopped fighting long enough to see each other clearly. The ending was quiet, the way most endings are. No dramatic speeches, no sweeping gestures. Just a woman sitting in her living room, grateful for the small things she had managed to hold on to. Mark came in with 2 cups of tea and sat beside me. "What are you thinking about now?" I took the tea and wrapped my hands around the warmth. "Dinner tomorrow," I said. "What do you want to eat?" He laughed, a soft, easy sound. "I don't care. Anything." I sipped my tea and leaned my head against his shoulder. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles, new worries. But tonight, I was at peace. And that was enough.